Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Helen Dutois. I'm the creative director of the Film and TV Forum. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So this afternoon session is called Fixed Content is Broken, a New Approach to Producing. We came about this session because for some years the Film and TV Forum has been covering issues of multimedia, transmedia, new media. There are lots of different names, but ultimately what we realized at the end of the day is that it is an element that we actually need to have in every area of film and television production and all areas of production. Audiences have changed the way they are receiving their information. They will get it wherever they want to. And so it behooves producers to learn about all of the different ways that you can reach your audience and be creative about it. So in this session, we will also be covering how to turn your audience into an evangelical crowd so that they can actually help sell your show with you as well. The session is sponsored by dimeRocker, to whom we're very grateful. And I would like to introduce you to the moderator, who will introduce our panelists to you as well. Mary Quinn has over 15 years' experience working in both traditional and new media. In the past, she was the executive in charge of production in development for CBC, Arts and Entertainment in British Columbia. She was the director of development at Bright Light Pictures. And she has worked for numerous independent production companies, both in the UK and in Hong Kong. Recently, she joined Switch United as their digital strategist, and she is currently working also on a project with the National Film Board Interactive. Please join me in a warm welcome for Mary Quinn and the panelists.
Thank you, Helen. So I'd first like to introduce Joly, who's sitting to my far left. Jay is the CEO of dimeRocker and OverInteractive Media. Jay spent 2 decades working in media so far. His first job was working at a cinema on a Canadian base in Germany. During his undergraduate years at Queen's, he founded a recording group and toured with acts such as the Tragically Hip and Wilco. After graduation, he directed some award-winning shorts and worked as a stage manager at Just for Laughs Festival and on the production of films, television and commercials in Toronto. He relocated here to Vancouver in 2008 and founded OverInteractive Media and received his first investment from Boot Up Labs and Local Angels to develop dimeRocker, a cloud-based platform designed to accelerate the creation of branded social games, gamification and social TV strategies. dimeRocker was a finalist for Best New Media Technology at the 2010 CNMA Awards, and Jay was identified by Tech Vibes this year as Digital Media People to Watch. Recently, OverInteractive Media has acquired MentionMap, a startup focusing on data visualization at the Grow Conference at 2011 here in Vancouver. And OverInteractive Media, his company, is presently working on branded social strategies for both the CBC and the Weinstein Company. Tessa, who's right beside me, is the executive in charge of digital programming at CBC Television. She oversees the production of transmedia programming for shows like Dragon's Den, Being Erica, Battle of the Blades, Cover Me Canada, Camelot, Heartland, and many more. Tessa's been working in the Canadian broadcast industry for the better part of 18 years, the past 14 in the interactive space. Tessa created CBC's first online arts and entertainment portal back in 1997 and directed CBC.ca's first live remote webcasts in 1998. She created the first program blog in 2001 for Marketplace and led CBC's user-generated auditions for Canada's Next Great Prime Minister in 2006. She also innovated the voting process for many reality programs. Tessa has long been at the cutting edge of media as it has changed and has been instrumental in helping lead CBC's response to this digital revolution. Currently, she has 42 active projects on her slate. Tessa also believes that the success for modern storytelling lies in their ability to embrace rapidly the changing distribution and consumption models, something we'll be talking about on this panel, while creating new ways for audiences not just to be entertained by story, but also to help tell it. I'd also just like to mention that this panel is sponsored by OverInteractive Media, and thank them. I'd also like to thank our panelists as well for being here. Everyone give them a round of applause. Thank you. So in today's session, we're going to look at some case studies from Jay and Tessa of interactive projects that they've both worked on and discuss some of the challenges and pitfalls that they have faced and the lessons learned, what's worked and what hasn't. We're also going to look at strategy, when would be the best time to develop multi-platform extensions and apps and digital content for an original property, and also touch on opportunities that might exist in the future to develop the objectives of growth, retention, and revenue across multiple screens. But before we get started, I wanted to get a show of hands from you here in the audience as to who would say they identify as currently working in interactive media. Okay. And who would say that they more identify as working in the sort of traditional media space? Okay, that's just useful for us. Thank you. So there's going to be time at the end for questions. So I'd like to launch right in with Jay, if you could
Sure.
do a little show and tell for us about...
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, as Mary said, we're Vancouver-based, so I am available if you guys are in Vancouver. We're located in beautiful Gastown, not too far away from here. And yeah, we're kind of like, my team and I have been, very busy, and we've been actually, breaking a lot of new ground here. And, Vancouver's always been known as kind of the place that invented Web 2.0, and we hope to do that for social television and gamification as well, especially around branded media and really bridging that role between as film and TV producers just move into being content producers, which I believe is happening right now. So I'm just going to give you a little overview, as Mary explained, of just kind of here. So yeah, dimeRocker, there's a nice big logo. We are a nice agency, and we do focus on strategy, technology, and relationships. So, and what we do is, we just like to gamify your digital strategy. But more important, basically just create these really compelling, engaging experiences that aren't bolt-on solutions that come on at the end of your film, but actually we work with you at the beginning to really drive that audience from the beginning. Again, we're like a real tip-to-tail shop. We, again, the social strategy is about building traction, growth, looking for other forms of revenue, and often game design, and then viral hooks to keep that really sticky engagement from very early stages. You can look at, Hobo with a Shotgun is a great example of someone who really leveraged the web and that kind of social community to bring that conversion right to getting an ass in a theater seat. And the next one is, the big thing is speed to market. Always being able to deliver some kind of fresh content. When you launch something on the web, it's not something that you launch and you walk away from. It's about continual connection with your audience. More and more we're moving into cloud space, so again, scalable hosting is important, especially if you have a celebrity go on a big show and say, hey, go check this out, and you have a lot of people hitting things. So we deal with all of this. Is kind of more technical stuff, and I promised I wouldn't talk technical. So again, microtransactions revenue, virtual goods are these really cool, things like buying things in Farmville. Dashboard is your analytics. Right now, 90% of marketing can't be measured. I want to, I'm totally all about measuring everything. We try not to use our gut for anything anymore. It's all about speed to market with a minimum viable product, and then iterate based on what the audience is saying and how we're measuring it. Obviously it's about achievement, it's about recognition. Leaderboards are part of that, creating kind of those kind of evangelists or super fans. Analytics I've talked about, and obviously everything has to connect. Mobile isn't just something you think of after the web. So, if you're developing something in Flash and it won't work on an iOS device, you're doing it wrong. That's an easy way to say it. So kind of before, when we started the company, we actually started supporting indies first. We had over 600 indies around the world really QA our platform. These are some of the games they released. Some of them are from actually a VFS student there, to that Battle Bears game, to that Romanian tank game over there, so lots. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what we've been doing now. So more and more we're working with guys like Disney. This was something we released on Facebook that was originally a mobile game. It's actually a full 3D game. You can go to the Phineas and Ferb, the movie, across the second dimension, and you can find the game there. And recently we did the Spy Kids 4 game, which is kind of like a Mafia Wars game for kids. And if you look, there's actually branding inside the game. There's actually IHOP pancakes that serve as an energy kind of metric. So kids actually had to ask for more pancakes to do certain missions. So we were able to deliver metrics of how many pancakes were kind of moved around that day, which, is something, it's a value add, especially money's tight. It's hard, if you have to go down these kind of routes, it's good to be able to offer that kind of stakeholder in your media a metric that kind of is just as good as a CPM or just as good as, traditional fixed advertising. Kind of what Tessa and I are doing in the last 2 weeks, we've kind of launched these kind of big things, which is, one of them is the Heartland game. This is all actually around CBC Sunday primetime lineup. So this is into its 5th season. Average viewers, I think, like 1.6 million-ish. Anyway, so this is kind of how the game started, and this kind of shows the kind of minimum viable product, where we started in our development process, and again, developing very quickly, with funding and the way cash flow works and everything. Just because things started like this, they often end up looking like this by the time they're done, and this is actually the game we launched. So again, looking at how people's user taste, changing the look and feel of things to really match like contemporary kind of aesthetics and values and stuff like this. So yeah, this is already making money. There is microtransactions in it. It's been, we're still in a beta period, obviously, for it, but we're doing really good. It's one of the most vibrant communities we've ever had to deal with. We have literally 2 people that just deal with community moderation on this one. Very recently, and this is the other one, this is actually a mock-up for Cover Me Canada. Cover Me Canada is a really interesting one that we'll get into, because where this was more of kind of a bolt-on, this series had been around for a while. It had like a dedicated audience, and we were kind of, the 5th season had already started shooting by the time we got into developing that. This one, nothing had been done. So this is a brand new show, brand new opportunity. So we were actually there at the beginning with Tessa, helping to define those kind of rules of the game, les règles de jeu, as we say. But even that, it changes to when it actually gets released. And this went through many, many kind of reskinning to actually get that right look and feel that matched the production. So again, we're not about fixed. We're always about how can we make the experience better? How can we move stuff around? How can we A/B test? And it's just kind of a way that, again, I want to bring principles to you guys about that kind of speed to market, about the fail fast, about the iterations, and all of that kind of stuff. But anyway, I'd also like to get to the question period and the discussion. Another very similar one we just launched on Sunday was obviously Battle of the Blades. So again, moving this kind of social voting application away from like phone voting and stuff like that. You can still phone vote on that one, where CMC you can't, and I'll let Tessa kind of explain the guts and idea behind it. But again, making this kind of super water cooler, where even if you're not there for that 10-foot experience on Sunday night, but you get shared with your friend or invited by your friend to this app on Facebook, that it might just create enough of a compelling experience when you see these little video clips that you will stick around and come and join the audience next Sunday and be part of the bigger show. So again, it's trying to figure out ways to drive people to that 10-foot experience, while also creating engagement and a retention during that 7 days when the show's not on. And these are all fairly new, fresh concepts. Moving forward, this is a sneak peek at Craft Hockeyville this year. This is going to be super cool too. This is really like, we're going to be building this really cool social wiki around the history of small town hockey. So all these little communities are actually going to be building their own little scrapbook. And again, it's a Facebook app and all that good stuff. So my big message, I guess, to anybody is, you can't afford to be just a film producer and just look at one part of the stream. You're a content producer, and you have to leverage that great IP, that great story, that great narrative on every little screen. So, this is a time in Canada. What I like to say is just be brave, jump right in, because we do have the funding for it. We do have people that are doing really, really cool things. And like I said, I'm here in Vancouver, even though like Toronto being this big media center, there's stuff going on all over the place. And yeah, so is that pretty good?
That gives us a good
Okay.
round up.
I guess we'll get back to the
Questions.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
So, Jay and Tessa, if you could start by telling us a little bit about your experiences working together on the Heartland app and the Cover Me Canada app. How both of those, you mentioned, Jay, a little bit in your presentation, how Cover Me Canada was done much more from the ground up, and Heartland was obviously an existing series that you came in later and created this game for. So I'd just like to sort of hear a little bit about your experiences on both of those.
Sure. So with Heartland, what the problem that we were trying to deal with is trying to engage the audience when we're not on the air. So we've got this great show, we have this vibrant community. We've had them for pretty much as soon as the show launched. We started to build this community of people that were very engaged with the show, engaged with the storylines, engaged with the characters. It's not just girls that love horses, it's all sorts of different people that are engaging with that show. But we put the show on, they talk about it on the web, on the discussion boards, and that was pretty much the limit of the activity that they were getting involved in. So we wanted to come up with a way to engage them beyond the broadcast, between the broadcasts, and then also between the hiatus period when we're not on the air for several months or several weeks. So that's where Jay came in. We started to talk to him about this social game, and it made perfect sense. We'd all seen the massive success of Farmville and other games like that on Facebook, and it just made an awful lot of sense. And as soon as we met Jay, we knew it was a winning partnership to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it was, in terms of the process, it was actually really good because everybody embraced it, not only CBC, but actually, I guess, Rescued Horse Production, which is 724 Films in Calgary. And they really, the great thing is it is I'm actually a producer on that. It did go through Bell New Media Funds, so that did get funding.
So in terms of speed, we should probably just say, too, that we met last November, I think was the first time we met.
Yeah, for when I was.
So it's been less than a year.
Yeah, when I was at the Canadian New Media, when we were finalists for that new media technology mentioned, that's when I first engaged with the CBC. So the CBC is being extremely brave, and actually, they threw themselves wholeheartedly into really embracing the fact that there's almost 17 million Canadians just on Facebook. That's in English language Canada, which is like almost 52% of the population. The more interesting thing is actually when you look at Quebec, there's almost 80% of their population on Facebook. They're even more engaged. So if you're not leveraging that's where people live on the internet. There's so much you can do. There's so many channels. There's so many very quick traction kind of audience building tools you can do. Part of me also, that even with the success and looking at how to build on something like, is everybody familiar with what Hobo with the Shotgun did? Kind of a little bit?
Can you do a little background?
Yeah, so just, and I will come around the horn to get back to this question, but so yeah, the great thing about just like in terms of a film, we've been talking a lot about broadcast, but I think it's important to bring theatrical into this as well. But building on the whole Grindhouse thing, obviously, Jason Eisner put together a trailer as part of a contest that was announced at Sundance. I think Rodriguez, one of the directors, had announced it to put these trailers, and then that trailer actually got featured inside the Grindhouse print when it did Canadian tours, wasn't that, I believe? Yeah, and and then, but the other thing is it was posted on YouTube, and it got I think 250,000 views, and was one of the most watched, and then later, from that traction and kind of built that following, obviously it's a fairly, this great kind of genre, culty kind of experience. He was able to translate that into quite a successful film for a Canadian, Canadian first-time filmmaker, him and his crew in Halifax. Did I cover everything, kind of?
But he also had a consistent online element.
Yes.
They have an EPK producer who also.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, the whole thing, yeah, and it's what I talked about. It's the fact that it wasn't just putting the video on YouTube and forgetting about it and going, well, let's see who watches it. But they, again, always deploying fresh content, which, as Helen said, it was in the form of an EPK. It was, always putting up new content behind the scenes as they were actually shooting the picture. So people were part of the narrative from the very beginning. Because, why should I wait for behind the scenes footage for when the Blu-ray comes out? I should actually, if you're going to engage the audience, why not make that part of the experience that engages them? And then if he had used Facebook too, if he had done one other level, which, his early days, he could have then also tapped in to really identifying those kind of, those super fans, and really got them to evangelize and get their friends out, and again, get those asses in seats for opening weekend. And these are kind of some of the stuff we're looking for. These are easy wins. There really are easy wins. This isn't complicated at all. It's something people are doing every day. So I guess just to wrap that back to
Cover Me.
Was it Cover Me or Heartland?
Well, we started with Heartland, but then how do we get to Cover Me?
Now we're going to get to Cover Me.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So, well, the great thing about Cover Me, and I guess Tessa said it best, is we really did, kind of look at, again, and it ties a little bit in because it is the kind of the Justin Bieber being launched on YouTube kind of experience. It is those massive shifts that have happened. The music industry is not the music industry of the 90s. Just like the film industry now is not the film industry of the 90s, yet people still like to talk about things that happened then. the massive shift that's happened in music is happening, well, it has been happening for the past couple of years in television, in broadcast, and film. And we see that in the box office and the returns. So what we did with that is looking at the success of how Justin Bieber, the fact that MySpace was completely disruptive for the music industry, how Napster, how it's not this kind of top-down model anymore. It's actually a lot more democratized. It features a lot more disintermediation, which is a fancy word for getting rid of the middleman, having that direct connection with the person who's not only gonna, they don't even need to buy the music, just give it away. That's actually, it's not about the music, it's about getting people out and talking and coming to your live shows and stuff like that. And music is super vibrant right now. The actual touring, putting money in the actual band's pockets. Yeah, the business of recording fixed music and selling it and all of that recoupable stuff isn't so great. It's still got a lot of money in it, but again, it's embracing as more, I'm not going to say you're all likely probably independents or starting out, but there's probably a fair amount of you here is that, it's with the tools available, you can do a lot of damage out there at a very small level. And again, Jason Eisner's a great example for Cover Me Canada. Geez, I just went on and on, didn't I?
I just wanted to sort of jump in there. If you could both talk to sort of at the best time to be thinking about the digital strategy, and that was why I was using the examples of both Heartland, which had an existing audience, and Cover Me Canada, which is a brand new show, because you obviously have quite a lot of analytics on who your audience is for Heartland and what's the most appropriate project and what the most appropriate plan for the platform would be. So the differences of working on those two, because I see them as quite different.
I would say it's not always the best time to leap full force and do a huge digital component in the first run with the first show, because we all know that TV season, the show might not last.
It can be fickle.
So,
Right?
so we know that that's a reality, that we can't always be that brave. But with this show in particular, because of the reasons that Jay was talking about, as soon as I heard about this show, and it's a fairly conventional, elimination reality music-based program, but to me, like, phone voting doesn't make any sense anymore for a show like that, because it's not reflective of how the audience actually engages with music anymore. So Jay and I started to talk about, well, we're doing this Heartland thing. We're looking at creating all these avatars, and people, you can track how much hay I buy as a fan of the show and stuff like that. Could you track other behavior if we're using the same sort of platform? Can we just track how many times I mentioned somebody on Twitter, a particular person, a particular band in this Cover Me Canada show? So the premise of Cover Me Canada is that we have 8 acts that try to redo a famous Canadian iconic song in their own style every week, and one of them gets immunity and one of them gets eliminated every week. So we wanted to track the audience engagement with each of those acts around each broadcast, so that we can define for them who should get immunity. Basically, the audience goes, and the more they talk about a particular band, the more that band will likely stay around the next week. The more that they actually vote for that particular band, the more they're likely going to stay around that week, which is far more effective to me than being able to hit redial, because that's kind of not really telling me anything about how the audience is actually engaging with the show, and it's not really a fun experience for the audience either, except for like 10 people that want to do it over and over again.
Do you find there's been a difference in when that digital strategy is conceived for a scripted show versus a non-scripted show? Yeah.
So I'd say for scripted, we do have to wait even longer, probably. For unscripted really lends itself to digital, because often we're talking about something that's got a built-in feedback loop with the audience straight from the get-go. When we're talking about a show like Dragon's Den, I know that people are sitting there at home yelling at Kevin O'Leary. I know they are. I want to give them a way to be able to do that in real time with the device that's sitting in their lap or in their hand. 86% of Americans that have a mobile device watch TV with it in their hand or on their lap. And I don't know what the Canadian data is, because we don't have research on that, but that is a really profound change in the way that people consume media now. And so that's why when I was watching the election coverage, the debates in when was that? It was in the spring? I don't remember. I don't know what day it is today. And I was actually more engaged with following the Twitter discussion than I was with actually watching the debate, which is fascinating. But an awful lot of people that I talked to the next day around the water cooler said the exact same thing. They said they watched the debate, but they were really engaged with how people were talking about the debate at the same time. So that's sort of the example of the unscripted space. We actually do have a way to talk with the audience in those shows, especially when they're really live. That's the that's the huge opportunity for us. So sports really lends itself as well when we've got like a real live, not tape delayed, but live opportunity. I'd love to look at those ones because then we can actually build a dialogue with the audience, figure out who are the ones that are most engaged, and actually get them changing things that are happening on the screen.
Can you give an example of when?
We're working on a show right now called Game Day that'll be the precursor to Hockey Night in Canada, 5 to 6 o'clock, and launches October 8th, I believe. We're not going to launch this element with it, but shortly in the next month or so, we're going to be launching an element where you can actually talk with the show hosts. They're going to be asking questions, and then you can actually, as a fan, get involved in the dialogue, and we'll be having those messages from the audience somehow in the show, whether or not it's on screen or the hosts are reading it, I'm not sure yet, which is like just basic. Lots of shows are doing this now, but it's a matter of we have to understand that the audience is actually driving their own experience now. It's no longer, we can't just sit back and say, well, okay, we'll make this thing, put it out there at this time, film at 11, they'll watch it, and we'll go from there. We have to acknowledge that the audience controls every single element of what they're consuming, and we want to make it as thrilling, exciting, and engaging an opportunity with them so that we can have mass audience again, because we won't have it on conventional broadcast terms. We won't be able to say at 9 o'clock, everybody go watch this, because they won't. Right. We have to figure out how to make. We don't make TV at the CBC anymore. We make experiences, and we have to figure out how to create the experience to be something that people want to play with.
On that note, how would you say you overcome the challenge, and what do you see the challenges being of producing secondary content that is as powerful as, say, the original and comes off as something that's got, an authentic extension and adds the material and value to the story? Like how, that's a challenge. So how do you...
Yes, the biggest challenge there is revenue around it. How do we pay for it?
Yes.
There are lots of funding agencies now. We're all figuring all of this out. The funding agencies are now very, very aware of it's not just websites now. There's, and Jay has a great line about that. Like the last thing anybody needs is a website. Well, we have to have them, but a website that just has the cast and the bio pictures of the cast, like that is not enough. We have to have those things, but it has to be different, bigger, and the way I think of it with Heartland, for example, Heartland, the television show is the center of the wheel. And then we've got these spokes that come out of it. The game's one spoke. The books are another spoke because it actually comes out of a series of books. The site itself is another spoke because people still do want to go and just talk about their favorite type of horse and that kind of thing, and engage with each other. And there are many different storyline paths that the audience can go into it from. But the center that I'm always the most concerned with is trying to get them to watch the show and to keep watching the show and keep being engaged with it. But the challenges are that sometimes we don't have enough money to create all of those. Yeah, and sometimes we don't have the rights. Sometimes we don't have the. Sometimes the producer might not be as keen. They may not be embracing it as much as we'd like them to. And there's also the tension of, because all of this is about the audience controlling their own experience of the story and being able to produce some of the story as well. For Being Erica, one of the things that we're doing is we've created a Twitter fiction. I don't know if how many people watch that show, but there's two characters that were on Twitter right now. Julianne and Erica are talking to each other, and they're talking with the audience too. And the producers on that show, they embraced it right away. But I know there are other producers on other shows that would say, I don't want the audience to be talking to me. I don't want to. Right. I can't talk to them because I can't predict how the storyline is going to go on our show, and we don't want to.
How do you convince them, or are you able to convince them?
Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we look at the places where we can do those things, and pass on the ones that will be too big a uphill battle to get over. We got to make choices. We're a very small little group at CBC too, so it's not like we can do everything as well. So we've got to make our choices based on. Do we have the buy-in from the producers to play with us and to want to extend their story that way? Do we have the revenue, and do we have the audience too? The audience, sometimes shows don't lend themselves. Not all shows lend themselves to wanting to be played with. Sometimes, the audience just does want to sit back and consume it passively.
Great. I'd love to get a little bit of the history from your background of how you've seen digital content and interactive content evolving over the...
And the names that we've given it.
Yes, I know. The interchangeable.
I started at CBC 18 years ago, and I started in radio with tape around my neck doing, and then this new media area started. And we called it that for a long time. And it was very much news has driven a lot of the stuff, a lot of what we've done at the CBC, for good reason, because it's also the place that the audience was there right at the beginning. As soon as the internet really started to take off, it was very much driven by people consuming news online. And so that's, I worked in the news space. I worked on investigative shows, playing a lot with how the audience can, again, control their own experience. I worked on a show called Disclosure, and which is sort of was a mini Fifth Estate. And one of the things I loved about working on that show is that, we do these really investigative, long investigations into these different things. And then, the broadcast piece would be done. And then we'd have so many people come to the site after that just wanted to read every research document. They wanted to look at every single transcription of the interviews that Wendy Mesley did with the person involved. And I loved that because it's really giving the audience power to own their own experience. And then the audience kept coming back. And the more you give the audience ownership of the story that they're experiencing, the more likely they're going to keep coming back to you. So I think it's all been driven by news at the CBC. I don't know if that's not the case for every media organization, that's for sure, but that's definitely my experience at the CBC. And then I think the factual area, we now call it Unscripted, really started to leap in full force, especially with these elimination reality shows and things shows like Dragon's Den, and we've looked at those ones to be the ones where we try to experiment the most. And now we're just starting to figure out how do we play in the scripted space.
Right.
And one of the things that has been different one of the things that has been the biggest challenge early on, digital was always its own thing. It was like over there, we'd be at the table, we'd all be, but somebody would come to me and say, oh, well, I've got this great pitch for this series, and they've got a pretty good digital element. Tessa, can you tell us if it makes any sense? And I'm like, you know what? You're the commissioning editor of that. You should actually define whether or not you think it makes sense, because I don't know anything about, I know comedy, I know what's funny, but I don't know if that makes a lot of sense for that genre at this time with that audience. I'm not sure. I can tell you if the budgets make sense and whether or not the audience online in Canada will gravitate towards that type of treatment of that story. But to me, digital's not its own thing at all. It's, we make content, we make experiences. We don't make TV exclusively anymore. We don't make radio exclusively anymore. We make experiences for the audience, and the people that are defining what those experiences should be have to take everything in that wheel into consideration. They've got to figure it all out, and they have to, and the producers that are pitching ideas have to be pitching ideas that are full wheel picture ideas, I guess.
Jay, you could talk a little bit about the opportunities you see existing now to be able to engage with audience, some of the projects that you've been working on and building, and how are you finding the audience has changed and in wanting to engage on these new platforms?
Sure. The audience more and more, especially as younger generations grow up and become like consumers and stuff like that. Technology is radically, if you want to know where media is going, just look at technology and the path of technology. Right now, we're in a hyper-accelerated state. It's just like that thing that I just put on the ground. My computer 6 years ago wasn't as powerful as this. This right here is like, there's so many people, like even when I take the Canada line and you see people in the morning, there's like advertisement everywhere, but where's everybody looking when they're on the Canada line? Take a look next time. They're all looking here. They're all looking at their iPads. They're looking at these experiences that basically, does anybody know what kind of the concept of cloud computing is? I'll just assume you do. You don't? Okay, well, the cloud is basically nothing's on hard drives anymore, that this is just a screen, that everything's on a server somewhere and it kind of waits for you. So it provides that persistent experience. So if you start watching a TV show, you might, as we move forward, like something like Netflix, you might start watching it through your TV, like with Netflix enabled televisions. Then you might watch a bit more on your iPad on the way to work, and you might pick one up on your little Apple, your little iOS device. So you can actually it's basically the experience is there when you're ready for it. It's not that you have to be there at a certain time, at a certain point. So as people that make content, this is a huge opportunity to distribute content everywhere in people's day. And if you look at even, you need to look at where people are using their iPods. Well, they're using them while they're watching, or let's just talk about iPads. iPads they're probably going to hit about 50 million this year, sold. Increasingly, 70% of them use them while watching television. They're used people wait in line. They're used at work. Most people that own an iPad take it to work with them now. So this is basically a channel into your content that someone can access 24/7. So these kind of innovations are things you need to think of when you're building your narrative or your scripted or unscripted, and how is that end user going to look at it? 16-year-olds don't really give a shit about television anymore. YouTube's way cooler. It's way easier. And it's kind of there for when they need it. They can share it. They can push it around to friends. They can put it on their Facebook page. They can be that evangelist when they discover something really cool. It's not that, they're not rallying around for certain experiences like sporting events and certain, dramatic things, but more and more maybe they're actually grabbing a season pass off iTunes to Breaking Bad rather than having to be there on that certain time of night that they can't guarantee they will be, because there's a lot of things vying for there's a lot of distracting elements. It's very disruptive. When you're looking at technology patterns, every new kind of platform and device that's increasingly connected, fast, HD, basically you can deliver really high quality experiences. We're screaming towards what's called singularity, which is, I'm not even going to go into, but it's and that's not that far off if you believe in those kind of things, where artificial intelligence and DNA, and it's like 20 years out, when the world will significantly change in a major way that we can't even see right now. And these are things that now, and that's why it's always dangerous when you look at people like to bring up like movies or these really cool things that were during like really formative years in their kind of filmmaker TV lives from when they were in their 20s and watching Seinfeld or that kind of 90s revolution, and kind of use those. And sure, yeah, absolutely, the 30-minute kind of sitcom is kind of coming back in Hollywood. But that's not the solution. The solution is, well, that's just content like anything else. How else can I leverage that IP and make revenue now that margins are thinner than ever? And we know that in media there's millionaires, but online there's billionaires. So my thing is, look at the channels, look at the ways that you can tap into these now, and most of them are free. It requires you to connect. If you don't have that ability to connect with, and there's tons of people that can code for you or develop with you and become that creative technical partner that can make that stuff happen.
What are you both finding to be the most successful means for driving fans to these interactive properties, like from the CBC's perspective, Tessa?
I would definitely say social media is a massive element that it's like Facebook, whether it was like 3 years ago. People weren't even talking about it. 5 years ago, people weren't talking about YouTube, but it's definitely dominating right now. It's the way that people are sharing their experiences with each other. Facebook just announced a new, and they haven't launched it yet, but I don't know what it'll look like, but a media sharing thing that they're going to be doing in the next little while, which is both it scares me as a network person on some level, because that's my turf. We're distributing content, but no, it's actually a huge opportunity. If people love your content, they will find it and they will share it with their friends, and that's exactly what I want you to do, because I want everybody to be watching Being Erica or Dragon's Den or Heartland or whatever it is, but it's a different model, and so we just have to figure out how does that work? How does everybody get paid? How do the creators of the content get paid?
Question.
How does
the business model work?
Yeah, and no one's really cracked that yet, I don't think. I mean, you probably have ideas around that as well, but I think I'm dealing from a very traditional model approach. I know Jay's seen our long form agreement, and it's very sorry.
Well, it's all right. That's why I'm tired today.
We're dealing with conventional approaches to how we pay people, and we can't do that anymore. We're dealing with conventional approaches to how we make revenue and how we advertise to people and how we earn revenue. We can't do that anymore because there's value to people sharing that content too. And how do we make sure that everybody gets a little piece
Yeah.
to make sure we can keep making that content, you know?
But right now, like, you know, in terms of, you know, the big question is how do I make money? Because everybody's like, well, you can't make money on the web, which is, you know, it's actually bullshit, but you can make tons of money on the web. Where Heartland's making money on the web right now.
People are buying hay and stuff for their horses.
People are buying energy, they're buying all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, in its first, you know, it without any kind of real marketing push other than one little PR advertisement, but it's all those viral channels. It's just, first, it's what we call, when we look at an IP, I look at what's called spheres of influence, and we look at what's direct, what's indirect, and what's abstract. So when we look at something like Heartland, we go, okay, so on the social web right now, how many people are directly connected to that Heartland TV show? Or the book series, or that the kind of the wheel that Tessa's talking about. And then from there we go, okay, so those are direct connections that we can grab. So we can probably convert about 50 to 60% of those over to the Heartland game very easily. That's free marketing, easy marketing. Then we look at indirect, which is that next circle out, and it could be IP that's related to that in some way. It could be kind of like Black Beauty. It could be another film or television or media property that already has a fan base out there on Facebook or whatever, that we can start going and saying, hey, this is really cool, you should check it out. And then we go abstract, where it's just the universal sentiment of girls and horses. And that's like huge. And each of these circles gets bigger and bigger, where it starts like with like 1 million here to like 10 million when you go really abstract. And yeah, the conversion's really low. It might be 1 to 3%, but still that's a free audience that you can use to create that engagement. And you know, you had asked the question, it's like, well, what we're doing, this new media, it works really well for Unscripted, because, you know, especially when it's live, when you go, so we can actually make changes and iterate during the week and influence, like that's what we're doing. It's a constant dialogue. The email trails I have on my computer, like probably got 80 right now. But you can do it with scripted too. Like for Heartland, so yeah, absolutely. We were a bolt-on that came in afterwards, but we were like, okay, so how do we create engagement and how do we tie into the show? So this week we actually, you know, and we've only been 2 weeks out with this, we released the first episodic mission that actually, Sunday night when it premieres, they watch the show. Monday morning we released this new, what's called a quest. Which is actually, it has a little element from that TV show, the episode the night before, and it has foreshadows some other tiny thing to start a little bit of chatter for the show after. So again, it's trying to figure out a way to create that engagement, and you have to share, and you have to, a lot of these missions, you have to actually go and get like 4 or 5 or 6 friends to do. Otherwise you can't complete it. So that again, it gets the brand out there, it gets the IP out there. Once they start installing the game, you know, there's, you know, not to freak anybody out, but you know, the permissions we have, you know, we have an idea of, you know, I don't have your name, but I know that you're probably, you know, how old you are, your gender, where you are living, basically, how many times you share, how many times you're inviting. I have all these analytics to understand how you're actually behaving with it, and then on top of that, you're also talking to me. So I actually then know, okay, then I know who this person is. And I know that this person likes this kind of thing, and they're actually, when you look at how influential is, they are actually a huge evangelist. They're kind of like in the casinos, what we would call a whale, if you use that term. But not in like, we're not exploiting them or anything, but we're giving them, you know, special rewards, achievements, recognition, that they're kind of doing that thing. So, you know, all of these things, it's not a top-down thing where your audience just sits in a seat and is passive. You need to really get out there and engage with them, because at the end, they're the ones that will keep coming back because they feel that they're part of it. They're not, it's just not something that's washing over them. So I don't know if that's...
Yeah, an example of just the engagement part and rewarding people. It doesn't have to be big. It can be like such simple virtual rewards. It can be a little trophy, little thing that I can put in my profile that says that I've voted so many times on Cover Me Canada or whatever. Or it can be with Battle of Blades. You know, like I can get one of the players to sign a jersey for the fan that we can actually, using Jay's platform, identify who was the most active fan of Battle of Blades this week. And I can go and tap that person on the shoulder and say, "You're fantastic." You know, here's a jersey from Brad May. You know, and that's huge. And that person's going to go and tell like their 300 friends on Facebook and celebrate it and you know, then incentivize other people to also participate in that show. So get your audience working for you.
Got it. In the future, do you see any opportunities for financing this, you know, the digital content models that we've talked, you know, the sort of the funding structure currently, but, you know, for particularly on the feature film side, any sort of thoughts on where you may be able to, you know, the cost of engagement with that audience. Like, for a built-in television show, there is funding models in place. How, if you're creating, an independent feature film, what advice would you have for a filmmaker in terms of?
Well, I think first, like, if there's anything, it's don't be a filmmaker, be a content maker.
Okay, yes.
So I'd start there. I would say, when you're going out, like, it is the film business. So, I think people need to look at it kind of like an entrepreneur. You need to look at the business part of it as well as the creative. I did work in film and television for 10 years, and a lot of the frustrations is why I became an entrepreneur. It's like, in this country, yeah, there is a lot of funding, there is a lot of this, but if you kind of take a startup mentality around it, there is crowdsourcing you can do to look at your content and your film. There is participation that you can give to people early on, kind of these investors, be they like social investors or actually equity investors in what you do. I think part of it is that we need to kind of start creating value early on in the process to basically, we're always creating this great content that attracts an audience. And that kind of audience, if you can carry that audience, when you look at like, I'm going to go into like kind of the Valley and Palo Alto mode there, but a lot of the, companies that are acquired and merged and all these things, it's, yeah, the technology's cool, but most technology can be replicated. It's usually the massive amounts of user base they have around it. So my whole thing about whoever you are is create that kind of, that user base around you. There was actually one of the panelists I was hoping to get, but he was just too busy, is this guy that runs 0.0 Productions in New York. His name's, Joe Catarini, thank you. Sorry, it's a lack of sleep. But he does like Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations, Joe Caglioni's like Brewmasters, but he builds things around personality, but he turns these personalities into be like super Twitterers, super social. He builds that personality that is going to drive the show, but they're also going to drive the sales of their own books. And he realizes, like one of his newest shows he just did called Lucky Peach, he actually went to McSweeney's and got a magazine that has actually the entry point that will become an iPad show and that will become a broadcast show. So he's already thinking way outside the box. Like Anthony Bourdain is the second most popular chef in the world, and he hasn't stepped a foot in the kitchen in 10 years, but he Twitters like a maniac. And every time he posts something on Facebook, he gets 4,000 likes right away. So that's always going to drive Joe's TV business. It's a different way to kind of look at the content and look at kind of things. But you as maybe a filmmaker or an auteur or however you do it, if you're not getting your stars to be super Twitter fanatics, part of maybe dealing, when you're doing a contract or getting them is to be social, to start talking about what you're doing, or even you yourself become a star, whatever, even if you're like a mini, a new school Roger Corman or whatever you're doing, there is ways to put your personality into what you're doing on the social web and actually leverage it into, money, monetize it.
Right. Could you both give some examples of campaigns, and they don't have to be campaigns that either of you've worked on, that you feel have really worked in the social space, and why? Sort of.
I like what HBO did this year. They, from more of a purely marketing perspective, they weren't so much in the sort of transmedia storytelling mode of things, but I think they did a very effective campaign this summer, I think they started, around True Blood or something, is an example, because I like that show a lot. But, they created a hashtag, what was it, waiting for True Blood or something like that? I can't remember what it was.
It's part of the HBO Connect. It was like, wasn't it? It's like withdrawal or
True Blood Withdrawal. That was what it was.
True Blood Withdrawal.
And they just, it's just so simple. True Blood Withdrawal was a hashtag. They started to populate it themselves, and then the audience got onto it, and then the audience started to say, I can't wait for such and such, and they started to actually talk about the show all the time, about how addicted they are to that show, what the characters are that they love the most, and they always use that hashtag. And then so HBO had this fantastic content from these audience people that were like, they were telling the story that they wanted, that was way more effective than buying a billboard, or like, or having a campaign on the air even, because they got the audience to actually do all of that work themselves and to talk with each other. And I can guarantee you, like, of those people that did it, they all watched the first episode of the new season. I'm quite sure of it. But that's more from the marketing side, from like the storytelling side of things. Like, I don't know, they go back to Star Wars. I don't know, like Star Wars is probably the perfect, well, and we're not supposed to talk about the way that people used it then, but like letting the audience control their own entertainment from that franchise. That's been a really effective one. There's so many gateways into that story. I don't know. Yeah, I think we're all struggling with it right now. Like I don't know if anyone's come up with the perfect one.
Right.
Yeah, the thing is the window, especially social TV, and now that people are changing, like there's a lot of stuff that I can earmark, like big ARGs and things that are expensive that worked in the past, or people say arguably worked. But what I'm looking for is the really simple. I like cheap and cheerful. I like little wins and lots of little wins and things that can be, basically iterated every day, building on technologies that are very, very adaptive and agile. I don't think you need to put $1 million into a big kind of an ARG, alternative reality game. Sorry, that was my bad jargon.
Put it down on the table.
But where you have, you see the Batmobile over here one day, and you see all this kind of stuff, which I think are super cool. But it's that kind of geeky stuff too. But right now the rules are being written. And that's the really cool things. The window literally, like I've been trying to talk to TV for 2 years about these ideas. They didn't, all of a sudden it wasn't until last November that they all must have gone to a conference and, oh my God, social games, social TV, and everybody's like doing it now. But that's kind of, so when you think it's like, oh my God, I'm behind, you're not. It's like this year, and I say it to all the clients I work with, it's just like, we're gonna fall down a few times. We're not gonna get it right, but we're gonna build our playbook. And this year's for learning, and next year's for earning. You're not gonna make money right out of the gate. You know what we'll get? We'll get a lot of great analytics, though. So when we sit down and we really plan out next year's strategy, and that's what it is. It's not about just like, throwing something out there and then saying, oh, well, that didn't work, and then 180 degrees. Like, I can't believe that no one's built off, as filmmakers, what Jason Eisner's done, and they're still scratching their head and saying, what the hell do I do? It's like, that's a great place to start. That was successful. That was something that anybody can look at and say, how does that apply to what I'm doing? And it's building, finding those little wins, understanding how you can do it without busting the bank, because everybody's worried about money. But what I'm saying is, like, there's so many little things out there. And so, yeah, does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
How would you both say you measure success, like, in terms of benchmark analytics in this social space? What for CBC would be considered a success?
Well, I mean, we struggle with it. I'll be frank about that because we don't count things properly. We look at our BBMs for the television audience, and that's like the master number that we all pay attention to. But we don't count yet. We don't count like the what does a Facebook like mean around Dragon's Den? I don't know.
Right.
I say that's meaningful because they're actually engaging with the content, but I don't know what the value is compared to something else. So my measure of success is when it's more anecdotal, really. When I start to get the feedback from the audience on Heartland saying, and I've had people like me from Australia, want to be my friend on Facebook because of Heartland. It's funny, like in the last couple of weeks, I've just been getting all these random friend requests from girls who like horses. And I think it's, to me, those kinds of things, like the anecdotal, we're monitoring all the buzz, and that's why Jay's company is great for the sort of dashboard analytics that they can give to us. But right now, I can go and tell my bosses, that look at this great activity, but we don't, as a company, measure it properly yet. Right now, it's just anecdotal, but that's we're dealing with what we've got,
Right.
But it's hard to compare apples and oranges, and why do we do this and why do we do that?
What are the analytics showing you on the Heartland and Cover Me Canada so far? I mean, I know they're both new.
Well, because it's such a recent release right now, we're really focused on perfecting the user experience. So more than anything, we're looking at getting rid of bugs. So my whole thing is, it's again speed to market, and it really doesn't matter if there's a few bugs or whatever. It's just get it out there and get people playing with it. And I often release broken stuff because if people you don't know why put a feature in that no one's going to use. So the best thing you can do is put it in and make it broken. And then if everybody asks for it, like neighbors, then it's like, okay, we'll put that in. But if no one says anything, don't build it. Don't spend the money. Again, it's using little bits of money in a really smart kind of way. So right now, my analytics are really more than is first get the game working and kind of perfect that minimum viable product. And then once we start to do that, then coordinate with, again, the next part is coordinating and leveraging that huge amount of television potential, popping the lower thirds, putting up special codes that we could actually use for conversion. And this is the next stage. So everything that we're doing now is stage gating. So we measure and see what worked, what didn't. Okay, now let's get, like, right now we're working on the messaging for next week's episodes of Battle of the Blades and Cover Me Canada, and saying, okay, so this thing to just go here now and vote wasn't working. So how can we change that piece of script so it does work? Where can we put that new piece of text to get people to go to Facebook? How can we make that click through faster and easier? And this is, again, this is what I'm interested in right now, is, again, how do we make a move on television that affects the online and vice versa? And then once we get that kind of audience, the next thing is monetize the hell out of it. So that's first you got to get the eyeballs though, and you got to get the experience down. So that's in short order, that's what I'm looking at now.
So talking about monetizing the content, Tessa, we had a little talk just before the panel here about, sort of your difficulties inside the broadcast as to how things are, valued, and working with the sales team, and people not necessarily, they value the eyeballs that are watching TV, but they're not necessarily giving a value to the Facebook like. So how...
And I think that's just a matter of, we don't have the common language yet, even like across the industry. So how does our sales division go to, agency A and say, we want you to pay this much money to have a mention on Erica Strange's Twitter feed? They're going to say, why? Like, why pay that? Why not pay this? And because we don't have a common language, we don't know what that means.
How
right
far
now.
out do you think we are from getting that?
I think it's got to be happening now. Like, the discussions are there right
Right
now that are happening. It's just that we're sort of, I think Jay and I kind of live in that world where we're always just a little bit further ahead, and then we got to wait. Racing a little bit, and then catching up, racing.
Yeah, no, but even at Switch United, like, you probably deal with it as well. Like, right now, 90% of advertising can't be measured in the world. Like, people are putting up billboards, but, you can't tell who looks at them. You can't tell if they tell a friend. Like, it's this shotgun theory that's been around since literally, like, the 40s. We're still living in that model, even though I have the ability to pinpoint with fairly, like, sniper-like accuracy who's doing what when. But yet it's these big bad, there's all these models that are still creating a lot of friction, and that's what Tessa has to deal with. It's like there's someone that's always going to say, well, I'm not on Facebook, so that must mean no one's using it, and that has that attitude, because people use their guts and believe their guts are right when they're actually completely wrong almost like 70% of the time. So
And you have the
where I'm
analytics
just
to prove it.
I'm like, I don't know, but why don't we put it up? We'll A/B test it. We'll see, do people like black sheep or white sheep? We'll know at the end of the day.
And what's brilliant though too is that, like, we could, like, right now I could say who's the most engaged, like I said, who's the most engaged Battle of the Blades fan. And if we have a sponsor that wants to have a positive relationship with somebody who loves the show, give them, free tickets to blah blah blah, whatever it is, right? And we can actually have really positive experiences associated with a sponsor or an advertiser, and that's really rich terrain because yeah, putting up a billboard, maybe I'm having an argument with my husband in the car and I see it, but it's a negative experience, but otherwise, like, you could actually turn it on its head and say, I can actually tell you, Coca-Cola, who's the most passionate about this, and associate you with them, and they get a prize from you, and everybody's very positive and happy, and your message gets heard, and they're talking in a really positive way. Like, there's an enormous value to that. I think way more valuable than a billboard, but I don't know what that value is, and I don't think anybody has consensus yet on what that is.
Right.
And it's just, again, it's the friction that I have with the model, and even like a lot of the stuff that we're pushing out there. It's hard, because it's like you do get a lot of sticks in the eye. There's people don't necessarily like disruption. People like things to stay the same. It's but the thing is, they know that any minute now the whole thing's going to cave in on itself. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting in the next little while, from my perspective. Especially the advertising world is going to be amazing. And for me, it's like what we create, in a sense, if someone's asked, we basically create revenue and analytic generating marketing tools for, brands or IP. That's what my company does. That's what our agency does. And to me, actually, the analytics are worth way more than the money, because they're actually the things that you can use in the future to create real value.
And my interest in that is that you could actually help make our storytelling better.
Yeah.
Like, if I know from you that, the raccoon traps and stuff that were in Heartland last week didn't really resonate, whatever, I don't know. Yeah. And I know that for whatever reason people are attracted to something else, then that can actually define where we go, and that's a perfect relationship then.
Yeah, and again, our tools are, like you mentioned, Mention Map, which Mention Map, we bought the company and we're trying to integrate it desperately. Running as fast as we can to get it in for the CBC projects. But basically, it's a dashboard that everybody in this room will, if in probably 6 months, be able to use and track their IP and do everything. And it's not heavy data. It's not going to be numbers. It's actually going to be this really cool dynamic visualization that you'll be able to talk with other creatives at an anecdotal level. So you don't need to be a data analyst. And a lot of people are like, oh God, analytics, they cringe. But actually, to me, analytics are like drugs. And the more you get, the more you're going to want, because it'll tell you exactly what's going on up there.
All right, I think it's time to open to the audience for any questions you may have. There's going to be some roaming microphones, so if you could wait until you've got the microphone in your hand before asking the question. You can start with the person here in the front row in the middle, down here. Thank you.
Hi. When you're starting a new TV show, is it a good idea to have the interactivity when you begin the show, or is it a better idea to wait a few seasons and then do the interactivity?
You can't afford to wait anymore. You got to do it right. It should be part of your script, like before you put, if you can think like that. Those, in my opinion, those are the people that are going to win in the future.
It's missed opportunities if you don't, but like I said earlier, not every single story necessarily has interactivity, because maybe it doesn't make sense for but I don't know. It depends on what you're talking about, but yeah, there are lots of opportunities that could be missed if you're not thinking about it. And I don't think interactive works if if it is something that was ripe for interactivity and then we try to put it at the very end, that's not going to work at all. So like if with Cover Me Canada, we didn't start thinking about that at the beginning, how we wanted the voting to work and having that be a main driver of the engagement with the audience at the outset, and we tried to hammer that in at the very end, I would never have been able to get it done. We would have ended up with phone voting because it's just too complicated at that point to get everybody in the room understanding this sort of abstract thing at the last minute when they're trying to launch a television show. So.
Thank you.
Gentleman next to the,
Oh.
to the side. There we go.
Thank you guys. It's been very informative. Great session. I have a question pertaining to a project I'm working on, and it's urban teens, troubled teens rebuilding cars. And this is a reality-based show that we're developing. I'm wondering if we get sort of coverage on Facebook and whatnot, and they're getting feedback how that might interfere or color how they might act in the show and that kind of thing. So it's kind of the cart before the horse question.
Did you hear about the amazing race this weekend where one of the guys lost his passport? I didn't watch it, so I don't know. One of the members on the teams lost their passport in the actual show race. And on Twitter, a whole bunch of people rallied around it, and they found the passport, and he actually got it back because of that. And normally they would have been booted out of the show, right? Like that in past seasons, that's what's happened when somebody loses their passport. Sorry, you can't play anymore. But this actually, they actually used the social media to actually continue driving the show. Yes, you're gonna the spoilers and all of that stuff. It's all potentially disruptive, but it's also potentially opportunities. And it's going to happen no matter what, especially if you're talking about a show that has a large audience. You're going to have people talking about it in the social space with that device that's sitting in their lap, because that's what they're doing. So I also wanted to get rid of time zones. That would help me a lot. Because that's a huge friction, but a reality that we have to deal with. And if you're using that feedback that you're getting, though, that's the thing. If you make the commitment to the fans of your show or the audience of your show that you're listening, but then you're not doing anything with what they're saying, that's a problem. It's not only a missed opportunity at that point, you're actually kind of giving them the finger, and that's not going to help at all.
Okay, gentleman in the next row. Thank you.
What if you're on Facebook and you like stuff ironically? Does that skew your results?
Are you talking about Cover Me, or yeah? Or you don't like the...
No, what if I like My Little Ponies, but I'm not really that demo? Like, how do you take that out so it doesn't weirdo your results?
There's no such thing as irony. Because right when you like it, how many friends do you have on Facebook? They all know about it too. You just did my job for me.
I mean, that's one of the questions that the producers on Cover Me Canada, when we first started to talk about the social voting, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that means, because basically buzz around the competitors in that show contributes to their chance of staying in the show. They're like, well, people can say negative things about them. I was like, yeah, people say negative things about Justin Bieber all the time, but he's enormously famous because people are saying things about him. It doesn't matter if it's positive, negative, ironic, or sarcastic. It's just, it's now, like, these conversations always happened. It's just now they're happening in a visible way. So,
Do you want that info?
yeah.
From those people, like they may not watch Heartland or whatever, but it's still valuable to you.
Absolutely.
The more people talking about the shows, the more happy I
Yeah,
am.
I love negative comments. What I worry about is when there's no comments.
Yes.
Because you know what? Negative comments, I've got your email. I'll just, you don't like something, I'll change it, and I'll say, hey, you know what? We fixed what you didn't like, and here it is. And I just evangelize that person, and that person feels like part of the process, and they're going to tell their friends, hey, man, I did this thing. I told these guys that they were, they were failing, and they connected with me. Part of it is always establishing that connection is very valuable. And again, the rules are still being written. There's a lot of cool things, and the other thing is we're working on platforms. Like there's over 800 million people on Facebook now, and it's thing that actually drives me batshit crazy. But they're always changing. Like if you go visit Facebook, the first thing when you walk through Facebook's door in Palo Alto is the word hack. What you have to realize is this is a 3,000 person company that's all a bunch of hackers. All they're doing is hacking that platform. So they break shit on me all the time. Like there's stuff that's buggy, there's stuff that, and then all of a sudden they do a big release and a whole bunch of things change. So part of it is you have to be incredibly agile. You have to be able to change. And I showed examples of where we started. And this is literally I met Tessa last November. And the amount of iterations in a very short amount of time till this product that we released, these experiences, are completely different than they were 6 months ago. So even if you're writing a script or anything, you got to be in that agile, fail fast. If it's not working, change direction, abandon it, and do something else. Again, it's this idea of trying to bring a little bit of Web 2.0 to this fixed media where you're investing tons of money, invest tons of money in the script, and you still don't have any audience reaction. Then you're investing tons of money into production. Then you're investing tons of money into editing, and you finally release it, and no one goes to see it. That's for me, that's unacceptable. How can we get people in right at the beginning? How can we get some intelligence from them right at the beginning to inform the process so when I actually release the bloody thing at the end, that it's actually going to make a difference instead of just, burn through a pile of money. Anyway.
Okay, next question on the next row.
Thanks. This is a fascinating panel. I'm really enjoying your points of view. I just had one question. I'm kind of thinking here about instead of producing programs, producing an experience, which I think is a fantastic concept to work with. But I'm kind of wondering, and this is like the Debbie Downer moment.
There's no such thing as a negative comment.
When you're a producer, you're producing content and you sell it to a broadcaster, you work with a broadcaster, you're required to get errors and omissions insurance, plus you're required to make sure that everything in that product is not libelous, slanderous. There's as you know, tons and tons of stuff that you have to go through to make sure that what you're going to be broadcasting will be safe and there will be no lawsuits. Who is controlling the litigious elements of this experience, and who is ultimately responsible? Now, this is probably a work in progress, but I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Do you want to answer it or do you want me to answer it?
You'll have a very different point of view than I can officially have.
I have, I've got, we have to get many millions of dollars to work with brands and broadcasters. I have to have life insurance to work with the CBC in case I die, because I'm apparently very crucial to these things. But yeah, but there's a lot of things when you're on the web. There's a lot of, on Facebook, there's terms of service. They have terms of service. CBC has terms of service. We have terms of service. When you're doing that permission, you're kind of saying you're not going to sue. If something bad happens, you're not going to, you have very little that you can do. We have terms. We have to make sure we can't I can't give away your information to a third party. I've got to protect, yeah, absolutely. There's things that we have to do as well. But a lot of stuff we do, sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. You can change fast. It's not out there And it's not like, again, fixed media. There's a lot of things that people kind of screw up all the time. But, the next day there's an apology, there's this. A lot of the stuff that seems really, if you're not out there being totally slanderous to people and doing something completely obnoxious, if it's just a little slip, it's just usually an apology. I've yet to run into any big problems. Anyway.
It's mushy. Like right now, a lot of this stuff hasn't been tested yet, too. And I'm not a lawyer, but I know it will be. There will be instances, hopefully not on any of my shows, but there will be challenges down the road, I'm sure, that will define some of that. But it is very mucky right now. There's tons of paper, as Jay could tell you. There's an awful lot of paper. I try not to look at it because it's overwhelming. Probably a lot of it's unnecessary, too. Like, some of it is stuff that, like, in some capacities, and I don't know if my boss would necessarily like me saying this, but in some capacities, Facebook is actually the distributor of what some of the things that we're doing. And I don't know if Facebook would, I don't know if I really want to tell that to Facebook either, because they've got a fairly long terms of service agreement too that we're very careful not to violate. But it's really interesting who actually is ultimately responsible for publishing the content and our laws are different than the states, and Facebook is in the states, and like there's so many complications and layers of complexity to that, and it's not ironed out yet. And I think I don't know if it ever will be, because after Facebook or with Facebook there will be another one. What will happen when it's Twitter? Or I don't know. Or is it some sort of universal international coalition of agreement that all sorts of media companies around the world agree that this is the terms? I don't know. Sorry. That's not a very good answer, is it?
Question right here in the middle.
Thank you. Hi. So I have a question. I think that you sort of talked about it a little bit with the music industry, the idea that the internet and the digital age has sort of become a democratizing factor when you're talking about audiences. And what I'm always really interested when people are talking about digital content is the idea that we're trying to find out how users relate so we can then tell advertisers that it's worth putting their products in our digital content when the digital content is speaking directly from the show to the user, and then maybe they're going to go and buy it on iTunes as a season pass and completely skip that. To what level are we still interested in using digital content to get more advertisers on board, and what is the line between using just digital content to get maybe more users involved directly with the show? Are we still focused on advertisers and large advertisers, or can we use digital content more to the idea of transforming how we're getting people to pay for our shows, essentially, or pay for our content? Mm-hmm. Is that at all a factor, or something you can talk about?
I'm very interested in what advertisers want to do in the digital space, and I think that they should be, and I know lots of them are very interested, because they can get such powerful analytics. They know if someone's actually paid attention to something because of the activity that happens immediately after whatever it is that the audience is presented with. That's a bit of a cruel reality, though, too, because we've all liked to believe that people sit and watch their television during the commercials, and we've all invested in that belief. So we're going to see. I think we're going to see a fairly significant cruel awakening on some level around that as well. But sometimes it's going to be pretty awesome, though. At the same time, if you get a company that's connecting themselves in a very positive, meaningful way, giving people access to content that they otherwise wouldn't have had, that can be a really win-win situation for everybody. We did an experiment in, I don't remember what year it was, 2006 I think it was. We released Canada's Next Great Prime Minister on BitTorrent because why not? It's a show that was created by the audience. The audience has to go and contribute their ideas to be eligible to participate in the show. The entire thing was oriented around youth culture and youth that had really great ideas about how the country should be better run. And we owned the content at CBC because we produced it ourselves. And we didn't, it wasn't a money-making show by any stretch. So, I was sitting there thinking one day, and I was like, I really like to know this BitTorrent thing. How much, do people actually want to consume content that way? So we released it on BitTorrent. The very first email I got was, why aren't there ads in this? We know you're a business. We know you have to make money to be able to produce this. Why didn't you put ads in it? I didn't put ads in it because I can't track it. Couldn't track it. There was no way for me to do that, and I couldn't tell an advertiser that this many people had actually opened it, and I didn't think an advertiser would necessarily want to be associated with the experiment that we were doing too. But if an advertiser wants to be associated with giving people a great experience, I think that's ultimately what it's all about, right? I think that's what they want. And analytics can show them what kind of experience that was. Sometimes we might shoot ourselves in the leg because it won't be as big a number as we necessarily thought in the past, and sometimes it's not going to be a positive experience, so we have to also deal with that. But I think it's an incredibly powerful time to rethink the way that advertising works with the creative side of the industry and how we need them as much as possible to help give us the money to make the stuff that we want to put out there.